Man, it's been quite a while since I made a video like this. Unscripted and one that I just kind of wanted to make on the spot. This is not necessarily the video I wanted to make and release next as sort of my semi return to uploading videos like this, and not necessarily my abandonment of the series I tried to start this year, but more or less just pausing that and starting new videos and back to my old regular type of scheduling because that's what worked out for me back then. So I'm hoping will work out for me now. Regardless, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to discuss nationalism within the realms of discussing history and why that tends to be a pretty bad thing overall for actually getting to the heart of what matters when it comes down to discussing historical events and how we perceive the past. I'm Will of 1918, and welcome back to my channel. Before I begin, I know this isn't really necessarily what helps the YouTube algorithm, but at this point, I don't really care. This is more or less to those who have been following along for a while and kind of wonder where a lot of my consistent uploading went. Things have been pretty busy. I'm finally settled in, and third time moving in a few years, so fourth time moving in a few years actually, and this should be where I'm at for a while. Still moving in and still getting things figured out, as you can kind of tell from the mess behind me, but things should start getting more stable and able to start doing more stuff. Hopefully I can even return to streaming War Thunder once every couple weeks, if that. Anyway, what kind of propelled me to make this video was an Italian nationalist who decided to comment on my pretty poorly done and not so great tier list, general's tier list. And I know you might look at that and look at this one and go, well, that video looks a whole lot better than this one. And yeah, I was borrowing my dad's equipment when I made that one. And the equipment I have here is a webcam I got for free and a microphone that I've had for years. So forgive the dip in quality. I'm still working on getting my equipment into shape. Anyway, this Italian nationalist was upset that I had ranked Luigi Cadorna an F tier, yet ranked Ferdinand Foch an S tier, along with Mackes and Lubeck, and Vorbeck, I should say, and Lawrence of Arabia, saying that several of the generals in S tier made the same mistakes as Cadorna, and yet I put Cadorna in F. And I tried to explain to him, like, hey, well, some of the criteria was regards to, like, popularity of troops, you know, whether or not they learned from their mistakes and stuff like that. And it eventually devolved into an argument relating to, like, oh, the Italians won the war for the Entente, or how, you know, the Entente couldn't make a single breakthrough on the Western Front, yet the Italians made breakthroughs on the Isonzo Front. No, they didn't. Or how the Italians were the reason why the Austrians got crippled in 1916, somehow completely forgetting about the Brusilov offensive and that being why the Austrian army became crippled. It was a lot to take in all at once, and I just kind of eventually started having fun with him because at that point I just wanted to see how insane he would go, how deep down the rabbit hole he would eventually lead me into the insanity that is nationalistic historical takes, which are generally absolutely insane and not based on any historical actual foundation of fact. It got to the point where I had asked him for sources. He refused to give me any. And so I stated, well, you're wrong, and here's my sources. And then when he finally gave me sources, it was just a repetition of what I had stated my sources were. So a very unserious person. Some might even consider that to be somewhat of a troll. And if it is a troll, well, masterfully done, but I doubt it. There's plenty of these people like this. You can look at my other poorly done and needing to be redone Wilhelm II video and see plenty of German nationalists or monarchists who have equally bad takes and are 100% serious. So what causes this? What is the reason why these people will go off and have these honestly insane beliefs that have no actual basis in reality, to the point where it would be as if you ran into someone who was very adamant that the sky was pink. Meanwhile, you can look outside and clearly see that it is blue. And when you mention that, they say, well, if you look outside your window, it's pink, and you can't reason with them. And before anyone comments, yes, I know that during the sunset, the sky turns colors like pink and everything, but blue is the predominant color. It's because of how light goes into the atmosphere. There's a lot of scientific stuff behind it, so don't catch me on a technicality. It's even blue at night. It's just there's a lot of absence of light, and when there is light and you can see colors, blue is there. But I digress. I'm getting off subject. It's fascinating, and it really comes down to the nationalistic aspects of the individuals and how they are so firmly set in their beliefs in regards to trying to prop up their own national identity. They completely reject any notion of the opposite being true, rejecting blatant facts and blatant pieces of logic that could potentially put their own ideology in danger and make them question their own beliefs. That scares them. And honestly, with most people, things that question your core beliefs will scare you. It's natural. You don't want to have to admit that you're wrong. You don't want to have to admit that what you believe is erroneous. But as a people and as adults, it is our own goals to continue to learn and look for the truth, and questioning our own beliefs and trying to find things that either disproves our beliefs or seeing something that challenges it and researching it to see if it holds any weight is pretty important to do, especially when you do that correctly and in the correct format, and not just buying into every last little thing, whether or not it has any basis in reality. However, nationalists seem to be a bit of a special breed. Usually, these people don't really have anything else but their national identity to cling to in terms of their own pride. These are people who generally haven't accomplished much in their own lives, and so they see their nation as the one thing that they can actually hold to as their own accomplishment, even though they played no actual role in said accomplishment ever occurring, which is pretty fascinating belief. It's kind of like those sports people who haven't really done anything with their life, and they tend to talk about a team being us or we won the game. No, you didn't. The team won the game. And it's very similar with nationalism. And when you start to have that kind of belief, there's a very good transfer of logic in terms of trying to understand nationalists by simply looking at people who have a favorite sports team. Now, this is not to insult anyone who's very interested in sports and has a favorite sports team and uses language like that. I feel like that is more logical and more understandable than someone who does the same thing but with a nation, especially nations that either don't exist anymore or are completely different than the nation that you're taking pride in. It's very interesting how that can happen, but I digress. And again, I'm not operating on a script. This is just me talking and expressing my thoughts. So you'll just have to bear with me here. If you're not interested in listening to this any further, you can just leave. I'm not keeping you here. I'm not holding you hostage. But it's something that I find very fascinating, especially in regards to history, because you see this everywhere. You see this with the copium coming from the Confederate people, the people who think that Dixie will rise again, those types. And you see that from different nationalists within Europe. The British, the French, the Germans, the Italians, they all have their variation on it. And the Americans are pretty much well known for being nationalistic freaks when it comes to their understanding of history. And I can say that because I'm American. Which leads me into my next point. This guy then, whenever I called him out on his Italian nationalism, he simply said, well, you Americans think you won the Revolutionary War on your own, and you won World War II on your own. And while that does hold true to some more fanatical Americans, assuming that I simply believe that merely because I'm calling someone else an Italian nationalist for their absolutely insane takes is a bit misguided. I am fully aware of the French contributions to the American Revolution. In fact, the French contributions to the American Revolution is why America pretty much sided with France during the First World War. It's why we supported the Entente for a large portion of it, not including the business interests from the factories and industrialists for choosing the easier side to sell to, but the diplomatic reason and the reason why the government was more fond of France was simply because of that. And of course, World War II, that was a team effort. The Soviets, Americans, British, French, everyone played a role in winning that war. And without any one of those key pieces, the war probably would have turned out a whole lot differently and a whole lot worse for the Allies. Yes, even the French helped a lot in that war. But back on subject of this conversation I had with this lovely individual. He mentioned things like talking about how if I was going to make the claim that it was terrible for Cadorna to keep attacking in the same spot and focus on the Alfonso without even trying to come up with a different route of attack or a different place to really try and strike the Austrians, then I should criticize the Germans on the Entente on the Western Front for the same thing. This is simply ridiculous because the Alfonso front is not a very wide front. It's a very narrow front with difficult terrain. And yes, while it is the easiest spot for for the Italians to have logically attacked from, there are also other places that they could have probed at. The Austrians were attacking from the north in very, very difficult terrain, and the reason why they didn't into a breakthrough is simply because there was enough Italian defense and the fact that they couldn't really bring supplies through. One of the few armies to really march through the Alps and make it through was Hannibal's army, and that was during Roman times, and he basically killed every single, he killed his chances of winning because of that move. Um, but when looking at Cadorna, there were plenty of other choices that he had. He could have left a defensive line strong enough to hold back the Austrians. If you look at the different battles of the Isonzo, the Italians would outnumber the Austrians 2-1 and still barely make any gains. If not outright lose land, simply because they would lose so many men in the fight, and then the Austrians would push forward and take back land that the Italians had gained on one of the previous battles. So, if the Italians, let's say, guarded the area with equal number of troops and then sent the extras off on ships to do an amphibious landing somewhere along the coast, I would give props to Cadorna for coming up with something more unique, even if it was not necessarily successful. Even if they landed on, Allied held territory somewhere in the Balkans and used that force to try and push up from the south. Again, other options that existed at the time, sending more men to the Western Front, things like that. But no, Cadorna wanted to focus on the Isonzo. That was my point in the video. He didn't try anything new. He was hated by his troops. He kept doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and this seemed to make the Italian nationalist mad. However, it shouldn't have, because I was fully well and gloriously talking about how well the Italians did as soon as he was replaced. And even mentioned, had he been replaced sooner, though had he not even been in command at all, the Italians probably would have been able to help win the war a lot sooner for the Entente, upwards of a year sooner than the war actually ended. Solely because any other commander would have done far better than Cadorna, solely for the fact that they are not Cadorna. Cadorna literally could not make a breakthrough or make any large gains fighting Conrad von Hotzendorf, of all people. Easily one of the worst generals of the war, and would easily be said to be the worst general of the war if it wasn't for Cadorna's existence. The other interesting thing was his claim that the Italians did receive zero help from the Entente until the very end, when they had already beaten back the Austrian advances all on their own and were about to enter Austrian territory. Did the Entente show up and decide that they were going to claim the victory for themselves? This is also not true. Ferdinand Foch, for example, was sent over onto the Italian front to help command the Allied troops there. He was recalled after the failure of the naval offensive, of course, but why would he be there unless there were Allied troops? They were, of course, not playing a huge role. They were more or less just supporting the Italians and getting them up to speed on the current doctrine. But they were there. He was commanding the Allied troops there. And during the last offenses in 1918 that pushed the Austrians back and completely destroyed their army, yes, the Italian army played the largest role, but it was a massive cooperative fight that was the Italians, the British, the French, and the Americans all working together and advancing arm in arm against the Austrians. It was a unified front of a multinational and multilinguistical army. That's a huge feat. That takes a lot of coordination and a lot of working together, something the Austrians were not able to successfully pull off, all under the same flag. That is a huge deal and something that should definitely be talked about more. I have a book that has a picture of an Italian soldier wearing a British Brodie helmet, and Italian soldiers fighting alongside American soldiers in the last days of the war, on the Italian front anyway. But that's not really talked about. And wanting to mention that as an Italian nationalist, when that really shows just how good the Italian soldier was at adaptability and working together with other people that they have never met and don't even speak their language, is weird. Why would you not want to talk about that? Why would you want to try and bring all the glory militarily when that shows almost an odd selfishness by calling your allies incompetent? That's just weird. Why would Italy join the Entente if they were so incompetent that Italy had to pull them up and beat the Central Powers? That shows idiocy from the leadership. It doesn't matter which way you slice it. It makes the Italians look stupid if you're the nationalist. Now, if you side with facts and history, it shows the absolute insanity in terms of how great the Italian soldier was, how effective of a fighting machine they were, and just how respected they should be. That isn't to say any soldier who fought on the field of battle who didn't commit any sort of war crimes should not be respected. Each and every one of them sacrificed so much for absolutely nothing and should definitely be given a certain level of respect. At the same time, those soldiers who were never talked about should be brought into light more, and the Italian soldier did a lot in the war. I have a buddy of mine that I met at an air show near where I live. His name is Tyler Ware. You can find him on Instagram. He does amazing Italian reenactments. And we actually talked about this quite in detail. And I find his knowledge on the Italian soldier and the fronts there absolutely incredible. He knows so much about it. I'd say he's going to forget more about the Italian front than any other person is probably going to ever know. And it was great talking to him about it because it was just like, I don't understand this. How can a nationalist think that it's somehow a good thing to mention this bringing up of the Allies and having to carry them? Like, then why would the Italians get involved in the war? Because their involvement was a calculated risk to side with the side that they thought was going to win. That's why they sided with the Entente. So either the leadership was stupid, or and the military had to carry the Entente to victory, or Cadorna was an idiot compared to every other general in the war, and merely replacing him would have won the war so much quicker. Again, nationalistic beliefs don't make sense. But that really kind of ties into my whole point, why I'm making this video. And the whole thing is basically saying nationalism has no point in historical discussions. There's no reason for you to be bringing that into your study of history. If you are someone who considers yourself a nationalist, you need to set aside those beliefs when you study history, because you will always find yourself either disappointed or angry, thinking that people are lying to you and that simply anything that disagrees with you is borderline propaganda. Now, let me tell you, anything that agrees solely with the nationalists and supports their theories is generally going to actually be propaganda. It's what started the First World War, was nationalism and imperialism, and the propaganda that came with it to keep them supported. And right as soon as the war began, that started to fall apart, with soldiers basically wondering why they were there. Nationalism is what created the environment that led to the First World War and the Second World War and the wars that came before it and the Cold War. It has killed countless people. Do not let it shape your beliefs. It has led people nowhere but destruction. Thank you guys for watching this out of the blue video. The video that I was originally planning to release instead of this one, I'm still working on. I had recorded it, and the microphone that I'm using right now, I'm still trying to get used to. So the audio came out terrible. I was holding the microphone, and it started to made a bunch of noise because of the tripod. And so that didn't really work out the way I thought. I'm going to get a new camera because this one's really grainy, and I don't like it. But I wanted to make a video with my face because it's been a while since I made something like this. So hopefully I can get my camcorder set up and charged and get the memory card for it and get it out of storage and be able to set something proper up on my desk so I can start making videos in higher quality again. So we can get out of the early 2000s and into 2023. But I don't really know when that's going to happen. I've got a whole bunch of videos I want to make and a whole bunch of things I want to talk about. And hopefully that will be soon. I might even make a video about the Spanish Civil War, but that is for another time. If you like this video, feel free to leave a comment with your thoughts. If you don't like the video, I'd love to hear what you have to say about how nationalism is actually a great thing, or if you are the person who I had that lovely debate with. My offer still stands. I would love to talk to you in a voice chat. That would be very interesting, or you can continue running from it. But yeah, if you are new to the channel, feel free to subscribe if you want, unless I scared you away with the talking points here. Anyway, auf Wiedersehen und tschüss, mein Kameraden.